I'm Steve from Norfolk and Good Road to Self-Sufficiency. As you can see, we're on a very snowy day today. The ground's quite solid, so it's okay to be moving some muck around for my no-dig beds. As you've probably noticed from one of my previous videos, I still have one L-shaped bed to do, so we're going to get that done today. I'm going to put a layer of cardboard down to start with. Put it down quite thick. Snow will soak through it, and when the weather warms up, that will start to rot and the worms can come up and start eating the growing mediums that we're going to be putting on top of that. So every now and again I'll stop, show you what's going on and introduce you to the final bits of this first part of my no-dig growing area. See you soon. So just behind me, as you've seen, we've got the last of the 4 L-shaped beds that I need to do, and you can see all the snows around me. Ground's really hard, so no problem walking on it today, hopefully. Not going to turn it into a quagmire because it does get very boggy here, mostly clay, hence the reason for using sort of no-dig principle for growing our vegetables. So you can just about make out the wooden edges of the bed behind me. What I'm going to do is put the cardboard down. I'll show you me putting the cardboard down, and then we'll put some growing medium on top of that. So the trick is with the cardboard is to make sure you don't have any of that shiny printed cardboard surface. Remove as much sellotape as you can, if not all of it, and then you put that down a couple of layers. So we've got the first layer more or less sorted there. Just got some oddments of cardboard down there that I'm going to put on, cover up the gaps, give it a nice thick layer. See you in a bit. So in the best way of recycling everything, once you've drunk the wine and the beer, recycled the glass, you can use the cardboard for no dig. Now, as you've probably seen, I'm using wooden edges from some trees that I cut down earlier in the year. Some people with no dig systems say you shouldn't use wooden edges, they can harbour slugs. But if you're truly going into a sort of no-dig permaculture way of growing things, you should have enough predators to combat the slugs here. It's when you have a really clean sort of no-dig system that some people use, there's very little room for predators to get in and help you look after the soil and look after the ground. Plus, as the years go by, as these yachts, they're going to help the fungal growth within the soil system that we're building up, and it's all about feeding the soil, not the plants. When you put fertilizers on the ground, rain can leach any goodness from them, but when you're adding compost, the grass heap that I'm going to put on here, that's all part of the ecosystem. The goodness isn't leaching from the ground, so it doesn't matter when you manure your beds or put a mulch layer on, it's all there. if you mulch, once you've got the beds built up and you mulch about once a year, you can probably get 2 very good crops from just that extra inch of mulch that you put on yearly. So I'm going to finish off putting this cardboard on, and then we're going to start to wheelbarrow some of the old grass heap on. So I'll see you in a bit. So this is the last barrow load of the grass heap to come up for the no dig bed behind us. If you've seen my other video, you'll know we've got a bonfire on the go most weeks down there, and I always get a couple of footfalls of the ash, potash in the soil, and there's always a few sort of lumps of charcoal in there. So in a way we're making our own biochar for it. So I'm just going to empty that last barrow, spread it out a bit, and then I want to talk to you about the origins of permaculture and no-dig gardening. So just bear with me while I do this. Yes, the wheelbarrow wasn't quite up to it. You saw there's a bloody great big hole in it, so I had to improvise for the last few loads and stick a bit of hardboard in there, just so I could get the bed finished off. Permaculture and no-dig gardening. The history of it is, to some of you it might be like Vogon Poetry. You might want your spleen to come out and kill yourself for listening to it. But it goes quite a way back, really. One of the first proponents of it was a Japanese guy called, now I need to get this right, Manasubu Fukuuba. I think that's how you pronounce his name. It's a bit like saying Norfolk and good, really. But Manasubu was born about 1913, the son of a farmer in Japan. Grew mostly rice the traditional way in paddy fields. As he grew up, he went to university and became a plant pathologist. And while he was in his student years, typical sort of 20-year-old, he did apparently, by all accounts, party quite hard, which ended up in him being in hospital for apparently pneumonia, but by his own words, it was a lot worse than that. And when he came out of the hospital, he apparently had a bit of an enlightenment about the way farmers were killing the earth, really, and then making great swathes of bare soil. And he thought he'd try and go back to his parents' farm and farm. Excuse me, the RAF guys are just flying overhead. Beautiful blue sky up there today. There's a robin floating about as well, you might see him. So when he came back, he decided to work with nature rather than against nature. It took him some years to get it right, but he wrote a book that was published in 1974. I think it was called The One Straw Revolution, in which he purported his principles of permaculture gardening and sort of natural gardening, no work gardening, he called it. And that really meant no tilling of the soil, feeding the soil, using more natural composts, not using any chemical controls. And yeah, it took him a few years to get it right, apparently, by all accounts. He ended up successfully growing rice without using water. And he just watched where it happened in nature and how it worked. And it took him, I think by all accounts, nearly 20 years to perfect growing rice without water. Basically, he used a ground cover crop of white clover to fix nitrogen into the soil, and then he just scattered all the rice around. In the autumn, when it was naturally form out of the plant rather than in spring when most other farmers did it. And then he'd chuck just a load of barley straw haphazardly all over it, and it would the rice would grow through. And he was having a lot of success growing more rice, more barley than his neighbouring farmers. So he wrote this book, and that was published, say, about the mid-70s. And I think that's when permaculture, no-dig gardening, which I think has come out of permaculture, really started. So it goes back quite a long way. It's difficult to do full permaculture because that's just basically going back to the forests and just letting everything work naturally. Some people like a lot of order to their gardens. I'm going to try and do half and half, but so yeah, maybe that was as bad as Vogon Poetry. So that's a little bit of history about permaculture and no-dig gardening. One of the greatest proponents of no-dig gardening at the moment, you've probably heard of him, is Charles Dowding. He's got a brilliant website, Home Acres Farm, I think is where he was. He's been doing it for 30 odd years. He's got some brilliant advice if you want to go and have a look at his videos on YouTube. But that's me for now. Next thing I've got to do is move some horse muck, stick a couple of inches of horse muck on top of this grass heap that I've done now. So I'll see you in a bit. So that's the basic prep. Excuse me. So that's the basic prep of the vegetable plot done. They're all the same. Cardboard on the bottom, quite thick. Cover up with grass. Some peat, I suppose you want to call it, from an old grass heap. A couple of inches of that on there, and then a couple of inches of horse muck that's been rotting by all accounts for 2.5 to 3 years on top of that. So I'm just going to let the winter do its thing. If by the time it comes around to using the beds it hasn't broken down as much as I like, I'll create compost pockets. So I'll use something like bulb planter, you know, those things that you stick in the ground, twist, pull a lump out, chuck a load of compost in that we've got making up the way there, and then we'll use a compost box. Appreciate that this is the first year of me doing this, so there's a lot of learning to do, and by all accounts it's going to take a year or two before we get really good results from this. So it's about being patient, it's about just taking your time and learning as you go along. So the 5 beds that I've got here, 4 in an L shape, 1 in a square. It's a bit of a homage to an online game that I have been playing on and off over a number of years. But when we get into stage 2, which is just up the way there, we're going to start doing sort of market gardening beds, and hopefully doing some boxes or supplying some the old people's homes and things like that around here. So you know, that's the plan. We'll see how we do. Lots of other projects. If you like this video, please press the subscribe button below, ring that bell, please make a comment. I like comments, good, bad, advice. It's all helpful. It all helps us all learn. So please get involved and continue to follow me on the journey. I'm going to finish talking to you now because I've bored you with something that sounds like Vogon Poetry for a few minutes earlier, and I'm just going to show you the 4 beds when I flip the camera around. See you soon. So this is the final bed of the 4 L-shaped ones that we've done today, and as you can see over there, the others are all covered in snow. But we've actually started making use of a couple of them. So the first one here is this little square one here. Get down here. We've got some broad beans just poking their heads through. And then over here we've got a bed of garlic. I think there's about 40 garlic in there. Little row of elephant garlic that I'm hoping to make more of, and then there's some onions in there. I think they were Red Baron, but they were from the little bulblets, but I've got a lot of onions growing from seed. They're less likely to bolt by all accounts. And then up against the polytunnel here, we've got those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so 5 squares and a little round one. They're 2-year-old asparagus. That's just a tray of snow. And then we've got some more broad beans growing. They are scarlet. And then behind them is a little pot of their leeks, so they're doing all right, and they're Bedford onions. So hopefully they'll all continue to grow. So that's it for today. It's blooming cold. My hand is nearly freezing, so I'm going to go and get a cup of tea and warm up and call it a day.